So we will talk, you will see these three faces throughout the remainder of this call. I promise I will not talk much. I am here together with Oleg and Vlad to talk about the update and vocabulary release. I want to say that a lot of the work on this presentation was done by Maria, who initially was a part of this presentation. Unfortunately, she's sick, and that's why she couldn't present. But just know that so much work was put in this presentation by her. I hope you will enjoy the slides. I really, really like the graphics, and my thoughts go to her, and I hope she's getting better. Now, as we go through this presentation, on the next slide, you will see the team that made this possible. And I'm kind of repeating myself by saying that it's an amazing team, similar to Phenotype February, but it actually is true. And I think this is a um, very unique side of Odyssey, which is whenever you go, wherever you go, regardless of the team, you always are surrounded by amazing people. And I've been honored to experience that both in the Phenotype February and here. And all of these amazing people made this release happen. And what we will talk about here is refreshes of the vocabularies that were done, the improvement activities that happened and took place, and of course the community contributions, because we want to celebrate the all of the work that the community put into this release along with the team. This release follows the roadmap. The roadmap is publicly available on the GitHub. As usual, there is a QR code so that you can check out the roadmap, this one, but also the next one, so that you can stay up to date in terms of what are the plans for the next release. And before we go into more details regarding the release, I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about why you would like to download this release. So the very first point is kind of speaks for itself. New release contains new procedures, new labs, new drugs. And to give you some sort of context, for example, if you have August 2024 release, and if you're not downloading the current release, you're missing out on 35,000 new NDC drug codes, which is especially relevant to those that are in the US. Now, you could say, well, but these are new drugs. They're not yet in the data, so why should I care? Well, on the next slide, you will see what you're missing out if you haven't downloaded one single August release. So if you just skipped one release. If that happens, if you're on the February 2024 version or prior, you're missing on almost 60,000 new drugs coded as NDC codes. Now, some of those drugs will already have data loaded on it because we're talking about the year of 2024 and all of the patients taking these new drugs. Also, if you're in Korea, you're missing out on 38,000 of the new EDI drugs that were added as a part of the community contribution. If you're in Europe, you're missing out on the almost 500 new ATC codes and their relationships, which we know are very relevant to the work that is done on drugs in Europe. You're also missing out on the new investigational drugs that are of interest for some, almost 2,000. And of course, you're missing out on all of the drugs that are coming from common procedural terminologies like CPT4, HCPCS, ICD-10 PCS, some of the vaccines. And this is just an example for drugs, but of course, that would be relevant for procedures, for measurements, sometimes for conditions. And also, if you haven't seen your vocabulary on the previous slide, that is the sign for you to consider community contribution and consider adding your vocabularies to the Odyssey vocabularies. Second point is that we're improving mappings for conditions. This is what everybody cares about. And here on the slide, you can see an example of one could think ridiculous error, where you have the carcinoma of skin of upper limb, aka your arm and shoulder, mapping to the carcinoma of skin of upper lip. So that is an obvious mistake that you could also see how it happened, because the words are very similar, yet these are very different parts of the body. And it was in one of the recent releases changed to the proper target, which is carcinoma of upper limb. And that specific case happened because one of our community members caught this mistake and submitted a community contribution. So that highlights two things. A, there are constant improvements, even in the condition mappings happening. If you're not downloading the vocabularies, you're missing out on those improvements. And B, community contributors sometimes already do the work of quality assurance for you, along with our quality assurance, and help you catch the mistakes that you would otherwise miss. So that is the sign for you, the second sign for you to download this release. Now, the third aspect is, of course, all of the hierarchies. This is something that we learned in the Phenotype February, which is using hierarchies, or not learned, but sort of reinforced, that using hierarchies is very, very convenient for concept set creation. And we indeed rely on them a lot. And the past two releases contained so much work on the hierarchies that help you build correct and comprehensive concept sets. If we talk about drugs, it's new expanded hierarchy for ATC. We get all sorts of questions from our European partners about the ATC. Oftentimes, those questions are relevant for the older versions, while we fixed the bugs and expanded the hierarchy in the new releases. So this is the sign for our European partners to download the vocabularies purely for the hierarchy of drugs. On top of the hierarchy for drugs, we have new MEDRA hierarchy that we highlighted on one of the work group calls, where we were talking about how we build the connections between MEDRA and SNOMED. This is for conditions. And of course, there is so much interest in good hierarchies for measurements and procedures, because this is something we struggle the most, and concept sets for procedures and labs have traditionally been the hardest. Now, the past two releases do contain a lot of expansions for the labs hierarchies and for the procedural hierarchies. And when we say a lot, we quite literally talk about thousands of new relationships that go into each of the hierarchies. So if you do phenotyping, if you do studies, you really want to get the newest release, because creating concept sets will get easier. Now, here, this is where I pass it to Oleg, who will dive deeper into the details of this release.
Thank you, Anna. And as Anna said, I will talk more about the vocabularies. So we refreshed lots of them according to the roadmap, starting from the SNOMED package and all the way down this list to the ATC. And let's talk about SNOMED first. It's just a reminder that SNOMED in Odyssey consists of three versions, which is international version, US version, and UK version, and all of them have been updated to the respective August, September, and October versions of 2024, which added almost 5,000 of new concepts and slightly more than 2,000 of new replacement relationships. We also added synonyms in Spanish. This is the issue that have been requested multiple times and was previously blocked by a refresh of Athena. But now in Athena, you can see all the synonyms split by their language, and it's not a blocker anymore. Therefore, we finally added SNOMED synonyms in Spanish. And also, SNOMED is one of the vocabularies that is affected by the review of pre- and post-coordination and revision of evaluation findings. Almost 3,000 concepts underwent a review, and I will talk more about that later. Other vocabularies are dependent on SNOMED, and mappings in them have been updated following the release of SNOMED. In addition, we curated mappings following the changes of other vocabularies for ICD-10, ICD-10-CM, KCD-7, and also read. Loing was updated to version 2.78, a huge update, almost 3,500 concepts added. We also utilized one new table from Loing sources, which is Loing consumer name. This is a table that contains synonyms, and you can see the examples here on the slide. So these synonyms used in many things. For example, it can be used for the expansion of the hierarchy between Loing and SNOMED, and they mostly represent the common names for the lab test. So two lab tests for glucose, one in mixed venous blood and one in capillary blood, measured differently, but they still have the synonym that is actually can be understood by anyone, just simply glucose blood. We also extended the hierarchy of Loing SNOMED, almost 1,000 new ESA relationships between these two vocabularies. CPT4 refresh. CPT4 was updated to version of 2024 AB of UMLS. So 267 new concepts, 27 new historical codes, and also almost 3,000 of new ESA relationships between CPT4 and SNOMED. So again, extension of the hierarchy. And we also changed MAPS2 relationships to has associated visit relationships, leading from CPT4 to the respective visits. Again, I will talk about this in details later. Same goes for HICPICS, new version, 227 new concepts, extended the hierarchy, and again, changed from MAPS2 to health associated visit. ICD-10 PCS has been refreshed as well, we slightly refined the hierarchy. It's minus 8,000 erroneous or extensive links between ICD-10 PCS and SNOMED. And also we added 22 drug mappings and 662 new concepts. MEDRA refresh. And for MEDRA, we added 640 new concepts. And for what is really important for MEDRA is when we add mappings, we also add hierarchical relationships because they serve as a basis for mappings. Mappings serve as basis for hierarchical relationships between MEDRA and SNOMED. So 640 new concepts, 1,100 new ESA subsumes relationships, and slightly less, so 1,062 new MAPS2 relationships between MEDRA and SNOMED. ATC has been refreshed as well. 92 new concepts have been added to this release, and we continue refinement of ATC and the RX norm hierarchy. We continue to add new QA and QC tests, and also in this release, we significantly reduced number of one-to-many relationships between RX norm and ATC. So previously, the maximal number of ATC codes per RX norm was 45. It dropped to 17, and 17 is still a lot, but this is a sad reality for complex RX norm extension drugs. Other vocabularies have been updated as well, like civics, RX norm, all new versions for them. NGC is mentioned by Anna, UCUM and NUC has been updated. We want to highlight that we learn from the community, and we learn from the exchange of the ideas in the community. We learn from user experience. And in this release, we reviewed the approach to post-coordination of evaluation findings and mapping of CPT4 and HICPICS procedure codes to visit domain. So let's start with evaluation findings. So first of all, we made the distinction between the condition domain and measurement domain. So for concepts that represent syndromes, procedure results, or concepts without specific analyte are conditions, like agranulocytosis, colonoscopy abnormal, or liver enzymes abnormal. Agranulocytosis is a syndrome, hence it is a condition. Colonoscopy abnormal is a procedure result, hence a condition, as well as concepts liver enzymes abnormal. And measurement domain represents both tests and results, like PSA level above reference range, or results of a single test. And when we are done with the domain assignment, the next step is mapping. So conditions must be pre-coordinated, which means represented by a single concept, And measurements must be post-coordinated, represented by measurement and result. So neutropenia, for example, previously mapped to measurement and result, as you can see on the top of the slide, so maps to neutrophil count and value below reference range. In new version, in new release, is mapped to a condition neutropenia. We also refined the CPT4 HICPICS and visit mappings. So previously, these concepts were non-standard and mapped to procedure and visit. And now they are standard, including the hierarchy, and relationships to visits have been changed to has associated visit. You are able to construct visits from these concepts if you need to, but you don't have to do it if you have other reliable sources for a visit. That was requested by the community, and we made this change. And finally, we introduced new vocabulary, ERTC. It's a European Organization for Research and Treatment of Cancer. It was a partnership project, and this vocabulary allows or supports source-level analytics coming from ERTC quality of life surveys. The content was sourced from the ERTC quality of life questionnaire via the item library website and was limited to clinically validated items. So this is a prominent example of collaboration between multiple organizations and working group, including the vocabulary working group and the survey working groups in Odyssey. And now let's talk more about the community contributions.
Yeah, okay. Just give me a second to turn on the microphone. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. Vlad is here, and let me dive a little bit deeper on the community contribution blog and discuss what happens during this release. So there are two major parts of the community contribution activities we have in place. So one of them is related to the changes in the management and the way how we manage actually contribution. And the other part is related to the content implementation and adoption. So first of all, let me say thank you for Alexander Davidov, who is currently our complex contribution lead. And he helped us a lot to create the communication channels and help a lot on describing the technical details on how the complex contribution should be done. Then let's switch to the content part and discuss what was actually implemented in terms of the community contribution. Can we go to the next slide? Great. So first of all, let me say thank you to Theresa Burkhardt, because thanks for her community contribution and thanks for her scientific effort, now we have new OMAP extension root concepts that were previously missing in OMAP vocabularies. These concepts are really relevant for dose calculation, and they are shares the semantics of quite generic route of administrations like basic injections and implants. And what is really important about this community contribution and really brilliant that we create and enrich the ontology. We create new formal relationships between the existing standard terms. For example, those forms originated from RX norm and RX norm extension now has a formal link, formal relationship, as route of administration to proper SNOMED and OMAP extension routes. So now you can use all of those flavors of relationships and all of this context to create your studies and to use it directly. Let's move on. So this is a super hot topic in the community, the oncology domain, and thanks for the oncology work group for their leaderships, the leadership assay and Christian, and for sure the personal thanks for authors Jeremy and Robert Miller, who make the HemOnc ontology update possible for us. So as you know, the HemOnc is a huge ontology that links the drugs, links the regimens of cytotoxic therapies, etc. together. And thanks for the Robert community contribution, now we have this vocabulary, this ontology updated. This update brings us more than 300,000 of regimens and 700 regimen classes. And what is also important, that this update brings more than 200,000 of internal relationships. For example, those one that will link the particular drug of your interest with indications or proper patient populations. And also this vocabulary update brings you 14K new relationships to existing standards like SNOMED, RxNorm, and RxNorm extension. It was a long run, but yeah, again, many thanks for Robert and the oncology work group to make it possible. And the last from the list of the complex community contribution is a SNOMED veterinary update. So many thanks for Julie Green, who make it possible, because she was able to understand the stage and logic we currently have in place for SNOMED veterinary. And this is the very first time we update this vocabulary since its introduction in 2019. So Julie was super proficient in adapting the most recent SNOMED veterinary source to make this vocabulary available as a part of our SNOMED module. So now you can use the SNOMED veterinary module with effective date January 1st of 2025. Again, many thanks to Julie for making it available. And the last in the list of our contribution is the list of GitHub simple community contribution. They may sound simple, but this type of community contribution is really important for the entire community, because all of this contribution fix the incorrect mappings. Most of them fix incorrect mappings that already exist in our distributive. For example, now if you are particularly interested in ICON syndrome that is associated with novel therapies like CAR-T therapy or bispecific drug administration to treat lymphoma and leukemia, you can use the mappings provided by Dmitry Demshits as a part of our simple community contribution effort. And this particular example shows that even such simple contribution will for sure bring benefit for the entire community. So feel free to scan the QR code and understand how the simple community contribution pipeline works. We are great to have a new contribution in future release. So please join us to make the quality of vocabularies better. Now it sounds like, Oleg, the stage is yours.
Thank you. We also promised you one more thing, and one huge reason to download specifically this new vocabulary release. So this is a day we all have been looking forward to for almost 10 years. And every once in a while, a revolutionary product came along that changes everything. And first of all, a person is very fortunate to get to work at least on one of these. And this is only a slight exaggeration of a new CPT4.jar. We were able to reduce the processing time from many hours to just 13 seconds in our tests. And we hope that you will enjoy it. This is all that we have for today. Thank you very much. And yeah, let's continue.
Excellent. Yeah, Anna, you want to add something? Yeah.
No. I just wanted to say that if we want, we can open the floor for the questions, or have some time back with this feeling of new CPT4 that jar. Maybe people want to go straight in and check it out. I am very much looking forward to testing it myself. This is what I'll be doing this evening.
Well, I do want to specifically thank the vocabulary team. We got to hear from Oleg and Anna and Vlad. Of course, there's lots of folks behind that. There's so much good work to get to this release. But I have to specifically call it Oleg dropping a Steve Jobs announcement of CPT4.jar. Only in this crazy community could that have been so epic and amazing. So thank you for that. That was tremendous. and if you don't know, now you know.
Thank you.
All right. I will give people, if there's anybody that does have questions, I'll give you a chance here. Otherwise, happy to give back the last 10 minutes. Okay.
Actually, one thing, Craig, since we do have a couple minutes, it's worth highlighting. I want to. So we're in March, and we referred to this as our March to data fitness. And a key theme of this month is going to be what we can do as an organization who has data to engage in contributing evidence. We're going to hear later in the month about specific activities as it relates to the Odyssey Evidence Network and tools for data fitness use. But in addition to it being just the announcement of the release here, a key component of being fit for use is using the vocabulary. One of the things that Claire and I were just looking at last week was which vocabularies our network is on. And one of the fascinating parts that I observed was when we started, and I guess now we've been successful in this for 2.5 years now, this idea that we're on a steady 6-month cadence of the vocabulary. There were members in our community, including some names that I see that are on this call right now, who said, oh, we can't wait 6 months for vocabulary releases. We need things much more recent than that. And yet our Odyssey Evidence Network provides us very explicit data that suggests that many of you all who have data are 1, 2, 3, 6 vocabulary versions behind. And there's lots of reasons why that could be the case. Many of you are trying to still establish a regular ETL cadence. Maybe you were, funded for a specific project, but don't have funding to do it again. Maybe you're kind of happy with whatever vocabulary version you're on, whatever the reasons may be. But I think as Anna did a really great job and Oleg in highlighting the content of this vocabulary, I think, given that our goal is to generate reliable evidence, it's actually really valuable for you to consider how you can improve the quality of the evidence you're generating by making sure that you're on the highest quality vocabulary with the most up-to-date content from all of these sources. So encouraging you not only just to take advantage of the fact that this vocabulary is available, but if you're in a shop that your vocabulary is behind and maybe you're thinking about, what do I do now? I think this is a really good month for you at least to start having those conversations with the community. There's lots of folks here that can share with you the good, bad, and ugly about developing a more up-to-date ETL process. And I think we have a lot to share with each other. And March is a really great time for us to be doing that. For those of you who are not immediately equipped to download this vocabulary today and get your ETL done tomorrow, which is, I'd say, everybody, it does not mean that you can't participate in our network studies that we're going to do. But I think that one of the things I actually personally am hoping to learn across this month, given that we've now observed from the Odyssey Evidence Network how much heterogeneity we have in implementation of ETLs in different vocabulary versions, is I think we have an opportunity to actually start to quantify how big of a problem is that. And my hypothesis is that this is a bigger problem than we appreciate, not because the vocabulary team has done anything wrong with prior releases that we're just fixing, but actually 98% of what I see is because SNOMED and RxNorm and Loink are pretty rapidly evolving items. And while it may not change on an absolute scale, how that we highlighted some of those numbers here today, but how much stuff's moved, but it's not so much just about the quantity of movement, but the implications of SNOMED clinicians deciding on a new hierarchy or different representation. And we don't really know right this second how much of an impact that is. But I think one of the big scientific learnings I'm eager for us to get to is to understand how important is it for us to really come together as a community and try to align our data standards to include not just the same CDM version, but also the same vocabulary version so that we can generate the most reliable evidence that we can. So I encourage you to take a deep look at this, think about your own ETL process, bring those issues to our various work groups and talk about them. And later in the month, we'll have some sessions to dig in even deeper. But I think, given that we're starting March, this is really a great opportunity for you all to be thinking deeply about these issues now. And Claire, Priya just asked a question about the converting CDMs to, we got two different tools that maybe, Priya, you may be mentioning. One is DEMA had developed a tool just to evaluate the differences of cohorts across vocabularies. But the second one is a tool that Claire led the development of, which is if you have a data set that's a CDM data set and all you want to do is update the vocabulary, we have an open source package that'll help you do that. So you don't have to necessarily go all the way back to your source data to do a full-fledged ETL. There may be reasons why you want to do that, but if all you want to do is just update a vocab, Claire's got a really handy procedure to do that, and we've been using it inside of J&J, and it's worked quite well for several of our data sets. Claire, do you want to just comment or describe where that's at?
Yeah, I will put a link in the chat, but yeah, we call it very simply CDM to CDM. And it's, we presented a poster on it at last year's symposium, but yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Like, of course, you have to go back to some of the source values and make sure that they're being mapped correctly. And then, move some of the domains for, as we saw some of those changes, they will be applied to your new CDM, but in that way you don't have to fully redo your whole ETL, which I know can be somewhat costly for time and compute. So we wanted to make that a little bit more simple. So I will share that.